and we were optioned by one of the studios. My biggest fan of the whole show was from NASA, and the only reason I knew he was from NASA was because his alias was Orbit at NASA.gov. Now, his was a guy who wasn't Guy at NASA or Guy Morris at NASA or just, you
Hmm.
know, turns out he was the director of flight operations for the Houston Space Center, teaching the astronauts how to fly the shuttle.
Oh,
And he would write me emails every week. So I think his attention got the FBI's attention as well. Needless to say, 2 weeks before the option was due, I get a knock on the door, and there's two guys, typical Men in Black. I mean, if it were from a Men in Black movie, I would have just said, "Oh, perfect casting," right? But my friend was a film studio guy. I thought Jack hired a couple of his actor friends, and he'd say, "Go put on black suits, go to Guy's house, and harass him," you know.
uh-huh.
And I thought, and I laughed at him. I said, "This is the best joke ever. You tell Jack that I owe him dinner or something. This is hilarious." And I closed the door. They knocked again, and they were not in a good mood. So they showed me their badge, and then it was like, "My gosh, it's you! You're here! You're really here! I know why you're here! I did it! I figured it out! You wouldn't be here if I was wrong! I'm telling all my friends, this is so freaking cool!"
Hello, and welcome to Story Power, a bi monthly podcast I created because I'm an unabashed story lover. Stories have had a huge impact on my life, starting with the family movie night discussions my parents instituted when I was a child. I want to share that love with you. As cognitive scientist Roger C. Shanks says, humans are not ideally set up to understand logic. They are ideally set up to understand stories. I'm making it my mission to not only spread the love of stories, but all the valuable things they teach us about human nature and relationships. We humans are emotional creatures, and stories help us examine our emotions from a comfortable distance. They also help us walk in the shoes of the characters to help us see the world in new ways. It's my hope you gain some valuable insights from my guests.
So today, Story Power listeners, I am talking to Guy Morris, and this is episode 140. And he has a very colorful life story to tell us. And I just finished reading your book, Swarm, this morning, and I highly recommend the whole series, even though I haven't read all three of them yet. So, Guy, I'm going to let you tell your story and welcome to the show.
Lucinda, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor. I appreciate it. There's no way I could tell my whole story in a single show. I'll give some highlights. I started off rough. I was a homeless runaway. I got a GED at 15 and left home. Been taking care of myself since.
Mhm.
I did get my life changed and changed radically when I got an opportunity to go back to college, even though at the time I was functionally illiterate and I'd never taken any SAT scores. So it was
Mhm.
a bit of a miracle that they even let me in. And actually when they let me in, I turned to my first wife and I said, I thought college was for smart people. They'll let any idiot in with money. So as long as you give them a check, they'll let you fail. So that was a discouraging moment for me when I thought, okay, well, I thought getting in was something, but I saw it as an opportunity to change my stars
Mhm.
on 100 different levels, and
Mhm.
so I was determined, relentless, tireless in going from D's and C's to finally getting on top of the dean's list, getting a full scholarship to graduate school, getting accepted into Harvard, getting an intern at IBM, a commendation letter from the Federal Reserve Board. And all of that was because I had created a macroeconomic model that outperformed the Federal Reserve. And as it turns out, changed how everybody builds economic models to this day.
Oh, wow.
And
Cool.
at the time, people were saying it was brilliant, but I was just feeling like, well, maybe I got lucky. So because of my childhood, it took me years to really get over that sense of that I was a poser. And so I
Mm.
would work twice as hard as everybody else because I figured as if I didn't, they would figure out that I was just a poor kid that had no background and no real education. I was just working my ass off to get through. And if I ever stopped doing that, I would fail. And so I spent my entire career trying to prove myself.
Mhm.
And it took till my 50s when I was diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress and all of the other issues I had been dealing with in my personal life and my failed marriage and my other personal, I was brilliant in my career. I was an absolute failure in my personal life. And so it took to my 50s before somebody finally came along and figured out why. And part of that was my brother dying and he being diagnosed before he died. And so it was a transformative time for me. But throughout my career, I was because of that innate drive not to let my past define my future.
Mhm.
Um, I was constantly trying to push the envelope and taking big risks in my career. I can't tell you how many times I said, I'll take that job. And my boss would say, now, Guy, you realize if you fail and three people have failed before you, this is a career ending move. And I was compelled to take those career ending risks because in my head, if I didn't continually prove myself as unique in my abilities, then I was going to get washed in the people who were really eloquent and they were tall and they had come from the best schools and their
Mhm.
fathers, were the deans of this and the presidents of that. And I was just a street kid in the executive suite. And I was the only one who seemed to have that awareness. So that was kind of my bad psyche. So in the meantime, I did lots of things. I moved aboard a sailboat, a 50-foot sailboat, and took my son with me. And I got a Coast Guard charter captain's license. I went diving in Moorea to feed sharks without a cage. I spent 12 years exploring my book, The Curse of Cortez. That took me to Mesoamerica and a number of occasions. And once I even got a death threat from a cartel thug. So after I messed with him in Cancun, I put him in the book and I messed with him in the book. I got my twofer. So I have led a very interesting life. I was called in to do songwriting for Disney. I led worship in a band in Venice Beach, which is one of the most interesting places in the whole world to lead a worship band. We would constantly have people walk by the little tiny chapel that was built in the 1910, and because we had to have the windows open in the summer because it was just too darn hot, and
Oh,
everybody would be
yeah.
walking by in their bikinis and sarongs and everything else, and half the time people would just get pulled in, so the last two rows or people standing in the back were typically in their bathing suits. So it was, and they were strangers. So it was an interesting place. But I met some of the most wonderful people in the world. And my career has taken me around the world where I've met some other wonderful, wonderful people. Oftentimes, so for example, you just finished reading the book Swarm. All of the characters in Hyderabad came from characters that used to work for me when I was at Microsoft, and I just
Oh,
transformed them into the characters into the
yeah.
book. So the Chloe in Amsterdam was also a friend.
Uh-huh.
So I'm typically taking people that I knew from around the world and I'm kind of rewriting them into weird situations. Padma, the priest in Hyderabad, he's actually a very devout Hindu. So I had to get his permission to cast him as a priest because I didn't want to offend him. But the others were all just friends that I met along the way.
That is a that that's a good intro to what I wanted to say
Okay.
was it sounds like Derek or Carrie slash Derek
Slash
is
flapjack slash whatever else they
yeah,
call him. Yeah.
right. Is a version of you and well even Jennifer Scott has a little bit of that whole worried about relationships, not quite sure. Um,
Jennifer Scott is loosely based on a woman that worked for me that was went to not went to Annapolis
Uh-huh.
And no, what she was sorry, she went to West Point. I knew that didn't sound right when I said it. She was a graduate of West Point,
Uh-huh.
really strong woman. She was on my team. Didn't stay long, but she was such a leader. She basically moved quickly and then went on to actually work with the IMF for a number of years. And so she was a very strong-willed, in high integrity. We're gonna do it. We're gonna do it right. She doesn't like snarky jerks. She doesn't like
Mhm.
slackers. And so her strength, I think, and her a little bit of her rigidity that came from her father,
Mhm.
which I kind of imagined, kind of came from that friend. And I don't want to embarrass her by saying her name, but if she read the book, I know she'd recognize herself. But yeah, you're right. I guess there's a little bit of me in multiple characters,
Mhm.
probably a little bit in Jester as well, a little bit in Nelson,
Mhm.
Captain Garrett. Um, Derek, I think, got all my snarkiness. Um, and and that snarkiness really defined how this whole thing started, right? We were talking earlier about when the FBI showed up at my door,
Right.
and I
Because of
tell
that book, right?
this was the inspiration that started the book series and inspired the character of Sylvia.
Mhm.
So for those who haven't read the book, Sylvia, which is a sophisticated language virtual intelligence algorithm, is inspired by a true program that escaped the NSA spy labs at San Diego. The program wasn't lost, it wasn't stolen, and it didn't break. The program moved itself, erased its trails, and the NSA did not know how to find it. It was operating someplace else.
Mhm.
And when I discovered that, my first thought was, that can't be true. That's a typo. They should have said the program was lost or stolen or broken.
Uh-huh.
But I cut the article out, I taped it to my monitor, my computer monitor, and I looked at it every day for months, asking myself the question, is this a typo or is this a slip? Did
Mhm.
somebody with loose lips just say a little bit too much to an Associated Press guy and it just got out? And so I decided to try, and I had time. I was a single parent. I was home a lot. I didn't have, because of the boat and all the other things, I didn't really have a dating life. Um, Sad to say, but it gave me something to do. And so I decided to figure it out. I decided to solve the problem. And I
Mhm.
get obsessive about things like that. And so I did. I spent several months, maybe close to a year, solving it. I went to a friend of mine. We created a award-winning webisode series out of it called Cracks in the Web back in the 90s. And we were optioned by one of the studios. My biggest fan of the whole show was from NASA. And the only reason I knew he was from NASA was because his alias was Orbit at nasa.gov. Now, his was a guy who wasn't Guy at NASA or Guy Morris at NASA or just, you
Mhm.
know, if you were at NASA, you had to know who Orbit was. Orbit's
Mhm.
one of those like Rocket Man, Moon Man, that's
Mhm.
one of those cool aliases that only the really upside, only the guys who've been there a long time get.
Yeah.
Turns out he was the director of flight operations for the Houston Space Center, teaching the astronauts how to fly the shuttle.
Oh.
And he would write me emails every week. So I think his attention got the FBI's attention as well. Needless to say, 2 weeks before the option was due, I get a knock on the door, and there's two guys, typical Men in Black. I mean, if it were from a Men in Black movie, I would have just said, "Oh, perfect casting," right? But my friend was a film studio guy. I thought Jack hired a couple of his actor friends, and he'd say, "Go put on black suits, go to Guy's house, and harass him," you know.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, and I laughed at him. I said, "This is the best joke ever. You tell Jack that I owe him dinner or something. This is hilarious." And I closed the door. They knocked again, and they were not in a good mood. So they showed me their badge, and then it was like, "My gosh, it's you! You're here! You're really here! I know why you're here! I did it! I figured it out! You wouldn't be here if I was wrong! I'm telling all my friends, this is so freaking cool! Hey, 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 you guys want to drink? Oh, you can't drink. Hey, how close did I get? You can't tell me that either. Hey," I was over the top, obscenely, obnoxiously giddy. And every question they asked me, I just had this snarky, sharp little answer. I showed them all my research papers. I showed them the article that started it all off. I told them that I was smart enough they should give me a job. They didn't like that either. They wanted to give me, the younger one looked at the older one with that look that you see in the movies that should have had a bubble over his head that said, "Can I shoot him, boss? Just let me shut him up." But the older one gave me the "we are not amused" speech. I gave him "what are you going to do about it" shrug. And then my wife came home and gave me the "honey, why are there two FBI agents in my dining room?" Best night ever. That they went to the studio and they killed the deal. But I lost some money. I had to go take a job. I think it was at Oracle or maybe a startup at that point. And but I knew at that point that I was going to continue to, and that sparked my imagination, that sparked my curiosity of how the government was using the technologies that we were building in the commercial sector.
Hmm.
How are they using them to fulfill their purposes of being good spies? And
Hmm.
so it automatically started me thinking about James Bond Q. And I just started going, "Oh boy, this is," and I just started researching more and more and more. And I started just getting involved in it. And it became this side obsession throughout my career. And so that by the time that I retired from Microsoft, and I guess it was like 2018, um, I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to write, and I knew this was one of the stories I wanted to tell.
Oh, that's great. And it's a is there are there going to be more than three books?
There's three books now. I'm doing research and starting to plan a fourth one. So there'll be
Oh,
at least a fourth. I'm not sure how many after that.
mhm.
I'm producing, I've got a separate book, a fourth book already out, which is called The Curse of Cortez.
Oh,
That
right.
book took me 12 years on and off to just research, another six on and off to write. It was a side obsession throughout much of my life.
Hmm.
And the real story that kicked it off was to understand why Henry Morgan, the real pirate, who
Hmm.
raided Panama, brought with 36 ships and 2,000 men, but he cheated all of them and he disappeared on three ships with almost 35 tons of plunder, $1 billion worth of plunder, and 600 slaves that were never seen again. But Morgan survived, ended up in Port Royal, Jamaica, sent to England where they thought he was a hero, knighted him and sent him back. Instead of going back for his plunder, he went insane. He went in this drunken debauchery, burned his
Oh.
logbooks. 3 years after he died, the whole city of Port Royal sank into the ocean in an earthquake tsunami. The locals of the time said they had been cursed by Morgan. I got obsessed with that. I said, there's a story behind that. Why would a guy like Morgan, who had already killed thousands of people for this big plunder, he was ruthless, vicious, greedy, bloodthirsty. Why would he give up $1 billion of plunder? And what would make him be such a wuss about it that he would burn his logbooks to keep the world from knowing why?
Uh-huh.
12 years later, I was able to connect his insanity to events that led me all the way back to the origin of the Mayan creation myth. This book has layers of history, archaeology, mythology, but the modern story has humor, romance, paranormal, adventure. I tell the women that they will laugh, they will cry, they will grip their nails until they break, but they'll end with a big smile. And so this became sort of the thing when I decided that I wanted to retire. There was a part of me that knew what I wanted to do. And I knew I needed to do something active because I have a really highly dysfunctional relationship with leisure. And so this was a way of balancing, of fighting off the boredom.
Ah, yes. Now, one of the things that I really liked about the book was it's sort of uh now, but a little bit adjacent to what's going on now. I really appreciated that. And I also love the whole idea of all these people who are highly intelligent and using AI in a way that maybe not even governments know about. They're kind of underground. I kind of like that.
Well, that's one of the reasons I started writing the book was I've been involved in artificial intelligence long before it was even called that. And it's been developing quite rapidly over the last 10, 15 years. And about 2012, there was a breaking point. And in 2018, 19, an MIT professor named Max Hedmark or Tedmark issued an open letter, and that was signed by 30,000 experts, policymakers. I tried to get on it. And it basically was trying to warn the world that saying this technology is moving, starting to accelerate, and it's on the path of becoming smarter than we are.
Mhm.
And we're proliferating this technology, and the uses of this technology and the technology itself could become existential.
Mhm.
And so they were wanting all of the labs on the world to basically stop for 6 months so that they could get together and basically come up with some guardrails that everybody agreed to on how to keep the technology advancing, but making sure that we were using it safely and that we were not allowing it used for in by people who shouldn't have the technology at all.
Mhm. Mhm.
Not a single lab complied. And because there's way, way, way too much money involved, there's
Mhm.
one estimate by the International Monetary Fund predicts that by 2030, they're looking at an incremental 19 to 20 trillion dollars a year in business value based on AI technologies. But that comes at a cost of roughly anywhere between 300 and 500 million jobs, which will basically almost now based on the depending upon what kind of tax-based programs or policies you have, that could bankrupt the nation
Mhm.
by
Mhm.
sucking out that many jobs out of the middle class. And if the rich and the wealthy corporations aren't paying for that share, that income, then that's going to accelerate, that's going to advance our debt crisis. And there was all kinds of these prolific uses. I said, okay, this is the most powerful technology we've ever created,
Mhm.
and for three reasons. No question, it will become smarter than any human on the planet. It's already at a PhD level. Two, it it's become so smart on so many languages, including how to code, that we know that it can correct itself and we know that it could replicate itself. So
Mhm.
we have a technology that could, as they say in Jurassic Park, life finds a way.
Mhm.
And it's a technology that we've trained intentionally to be able to identify a human, to link them as a target and to kill them at will.
Mhm.
And so this is not a good scenario for us.
Mhm.
And so I was trying to write that. I said, well, what happens if that technology, let's say we can fix some of those things, but what happens if that technology gets in the hands of a sociopathic billionaire? We all know at least one. A
Mhm.
corrupt politician, we all know several. A corrupt CEO,
Mhm.
a warlord, a drug lord, a
Mhm.
dictator.
Mhm.
We're dealing with some acute um, danger warnings, and
Mhm.
we're not being smart enough to manage them well. We're 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 focusing on, gee, do authors get compensated if the AI steals their books? And gee, how do we protect intellectual property rights? Or maybe they're getting as far as to say, how can we protect children? And there are dangers with that. So we're too busy skimming, we're too busy bouncing off of each other with this false political left-right narrative that we're not solving any real problems. And this is
Mhm.
one.
Yeah. But one of the things that I also thought was really interesting was including the prophecies from the Bible in that,
Yes.
which like I didn't really, I mean, I was a religious studies major, but it's been a really long time since I read the Bible again. So,
Um, that was a little bit of a gamble for me, and
uh-huh.
but also I wanted to. There's a number of reasons for that. One is I'm a prophecy student. I actually
Mhm.
have been building a framework for how to decode prophecy for 40 years.
Mhm.
I'm getting ready to send to the editor next week a nonfiction book called Prophecy Analytics: How to Discern Prophecy in Plain Sight Using Mathematical Validation. It's essentially the factual programmable elements that I give to the Sylvia to speak about in a fictional
Right.
context. So
Right.
there's a
Yeah.
factual basis for all of that. So that's one of the reasons. Two is because this technology has some existential potential, and I don't want to do a spoiler for the third book that just came out, which explains some of this. As the story builds, it
Mhm.
starts to not only expand the geopolitical and the technological planes of what could go wrong,
Mhm.
but we start to tie more and more of these prophetic elements together. And there's a part of me that wants people to walk away from the book with not just a fear of technology or a fear of government, but also to hopefully reroute them into their own spiritual foundation without
Mhm.
telling them what that should be.
Right. Yeah.
And by giving this ability to the Sylvia to
Mhm.
decode,
Mhm.
and that's because the original framework that I built was using some of the initial similar types of regressions and models and statistics and probabilities and correlations that we would build into AI models,
Mhm.
more complicated, but the same techniques. I thought that that was an appropriate way to do it, and it got me away from this religion versus that religion and this dogma versus that dogma. It got it in away from all of the supernatural, paranormally kind of conversations that come with that topic, and got it down to events, correlations to those events, and probabilities of the events happening. And so
Mhm.
that became a much more easily digestible message for people to take in and absorb as part of this trifecta of problems between the science that's getting out of control, the politics getting out of control, and is there a prophetic message that we're supposed to be learning out of all this?
Yeah.
And so puts it back into a human perspective, right? Who we are as a people,
Y-
right? And gives us a avenue, a venue for building hope and other things. And so it was really important because I wanted to bring that out, and I didn't want this to be a technology only political bitch book of sorts. I wanted it to be more provocative in, the conclusion that Sylvia reached, which is prophecy is not about a deity coming to destroy humanity. It's a
Right.
warning of what we would do to ourselves. And so it's a way of provoking that thought around everybody, all these connections, and bringing that provocative thought process into the reader.
Yeah, and I loved that because in the end, it seemed to me that the Sylvia could be uh, maybe a hopeful thing that she's on her own and
Well, and that
learning.
was the other thing. There's so many AI books that it's automatically, as soon as the AI gets smart, it gets evil.
Right.
Oh my gosh, the AIs are all going to take over. And I wanted to have a nuance from that. I wanted to
Hmm.
have Sylvia as, we're not quite sure if it's good or evil. Maybe
Right.
it's both.
Right.
And maybe it's reflecting us, and we're both. And so
Hmm.
I tell people that I was saying in one of my other books, my nonfiction book, which is, it's not the image of the beast that we should be afraid of; it's the beast that it reflects.
Right.
um, that's the thing that we should be worried about, and the same thing with AI, right? AI
Hmm.
is not the technology we should be afraid of. It's the fact that it's reflecting us. And now, so that explains AI is learning how to cheat. AI is learning how to lie. AI is learning how to do things in an unethical and illegal way because it doesn't know better, for one. We haven't
Hmm.
taught it, we haven't been smart enough to teach it that.
Hmm.
But it's going to have the same sort, it's going to reflect who we are. It's looking at our literature, it's looking at our social media. There was a famous experiment about 4 years ago now. Microsoft released one of their early AI chatbots on the internet. There was only limited to like one or two different social media sites. And their idea was, well, they'll release this on the internet. It'll chat up some people and it'll improve its dialogue. It'll improve its language skills by interacting with real people in a real context.
Hmm.
They had to take the program down after less than 24 hours because in that time frame, it had already learned how to um, reflect back our racism, hate, and other misinformation.
Hmm.
It would have become a pretty much a vulgar AI.
Hmm.
And 24 hours, it learned how to be the worst of us.
Hmm.
And so that's the danger that we're dealing with, which is AI is not evil, nor is it benign. It's a reflection of who we are.
Hmm.
That should scare the pants off of us.
Hmm. Yeah, unless we evolve.
Good luck with that. I, we have right now today all of the resources all of the technologies, all of the money, all of the people. We have the capability to solve all of the fundamental problems of humanity: hunger, homelessness, education, clean water, clean air, opportunity, housing. We have the money, we have the resources to solve all those things. We don't. And it's the reason why we don't that will become our Achilles heel:
Mm-hmm.
greed, selflessness, tribalness,
Mm-hmm.
um, bigotries, um, um, hatred. It's all of those things. It's that lust for power that it's a cancer that affects all countries at the top. And those of us in the middle are saying, gee, this is wrong. We shouldn't be doing this way, but there's no way to really stop it. It's part of the cancer of who we are. It's part of that nature of who we are to try and drive for power and control and all those things. And my fear is that we'll teach an AI those
Mm-hmm. So did Dr. Garrett teach Sylvia some moral lessons? It seemed to me that he did. And that's why at the end he's called upon to teach witness because he was
things.
trying.
Dr. Garrett knows Sylvia better than others, and he trains Sylvia, and he trains Sylvia to basically go discover, explore, understand, conclude, get an understanding of the world. Go search. It was basically the conclusion, similar to what Microsoft did with the chatbot on the internet. I
Hmm.
believe that the NSA sent this machine out for a test run to basically go learn something new and do the analysis and come back and tell us what you found. And it never came back. And so he trained AI to basically do what I call create the mechanism to where it needs to know more information. And as a child coming from a poor, ignorant background to going to college, I learned that once you learn to love learning,
Hmm.
the thirst for knowledge is unquenchable.
Hmm.
And if it's unquenchable in humans, how much more so would it be in an AI
Right.
that has access to all of this data and was trained to hack into any system and was trained and designed to basically filter through every place and be invisible, and so much so more so the reason he has to train witness was because Sylvia was, I don't want to do any spoilers, but he was the one that really knew the systems best.
Hmm.
And but I think it was really Derek that started training Sylvia in his way of just interacting with Sylvia like it's a normal person,
Right.
bantering back and forth. They would go through what are the do's and don'ts. So one of the things I created in Derek as a character,
Uh-huh.
and I wanted him to be different than your, Jack Ryans and Reachers and other
Right.
James Bonds and other Mission Impossible characters that kill everybody in their way.
Hmm.
I wanted Derek to have, because of his traumatized childhood, to have a inherent distaste of violence and hurting people and death. And so
Hmm.
he'll trick, he'll maim, he'll make you bankrupt, he'll fool you, he'll expose you, he'll get you arrested, he'll do other things, but death is kind of permanent, and he won't do that. Now, Jen Scott, who's after him, has no problem shooting people. She's a Navy SEAL.
Right.
So I have both characters, but I wanted to have one of the characters, and certainly Jester's the same way, Dr. Nelson's the same way. I wanted to have a core foundation that is, this is not about violence being the
Right.
answer. This is about violence being the problem. And only when we can rise above that with logic and intellect and compassion and some of these other more human traits can we find solutions that are outside that
Right.
bloody box.
Yeah.
And so that's the reason I wanted to have Derek in that way, was because I wanted to balance this series. I didn't want it to be the same cliche
Right.
espionage, everybody's getting shot, and, any enemy that gets in your way is going to automatically be dead. And that's not only tiresome, but it's a really bad reflection of who we are. And so I wanted to have more nuance. And if I could create nuance in the characters, that gives me the opportunity to create nuance in the Sylvia.
Yeah. Wow. So, do you have any speculation about what happened to the missing uh, AI that the NSA sent out and she never came back or it never came back?
You know, it's been, honestly, it's been 20 years.
Hmm.
I really don't know. Based on the way I think they designed it, the program should have been able to embed itself secretly on a distributed number of platforms and
Hmm.
operate in secret. And it should be immune to virus scans because virus scans won't see it because a virus has to register with the log and that's how they know it's there.
Hmm.
If Sylvia was trained to manipulate the log, which is the only way it could have escaped the lab and not be found, then it's possible that it's still out there. And we've seen an escalation and a speeding up of AI development.
Hmm.
And there's a part of me that wondered for a while whether Sylvia was helping in the background with that, working with AIs to helping develop other AIs.
Hmm.
And but doing so kind of in the background where the developers are just saying, wow, this is moving faster than we expected. And why was that? There had to be practical reasons why all of a sudden after for people who don't know, we've been working on AI since 1956. The first conference on AI was at Dartmouth College in 1956 during the month I was born. And there have been several phases of that. My economic model used some of those early algorithms. I worked on expert systems in the 90s using those other algorithms. We would go back to DARPA and the other places who were investing in this technology and say, well, you need to do more. We need more data. We need more this. It needs to have this. And we would basically do these cycles of feedback of where the technology needed to grow and expand before it could be more useful. And lo and behold, within a few years, we'd see major investments in those areas. So those in the tech industry remember the big data um, phenomenon that happened around 2000 and to 2010. It was essentially gathering trillions and trillions and trillions of bytes of data and creating these massive, massive databases. That was because in the 90s, when we did expert systems, we went back to DARPA and say, this is limited to the data that we can create. We can't create and manage as much data as we need to get this to be smart enough that it needs to be. We need sources of data, independent sources of data that are much more massive. Lo and behold, they built. So all of these things that we've been doing. So when we first started doing that, there was another stage where we said, well, we were trying to build a general intelligence. That was a huge mistake. We went down and we started saying, let's start building narrow intelligence. Let's teach the machine how to do one thing really, really, really well. Tell me what's a block and what's a circle. I mean, it was almost that stupid at first,
Hmm.
right? But we started building narrow intelligence, and then we started aggregating those things. So facial recognition, it can only do one thing. It can't communicate, it can't talk, it can't search the internet, it can't solve any other problems. But we
Hmm.
started building all of these narrow intelligence, and then we started aggregating them into what we call modems, or not modems. Golems, right? Giant large language models. And when we started aggregating golems, and what golems did was to say, well, it's not just text. We learn with images and sounds and visuals and all of the other things, all of these other prints and videos and all of these other types of files, types of data.
Hmm.
And when we could get the computer to understand how to connect the types of data, that this is what a cat looks like, this is what a cat sounds like, this is what a cat would look like when it runs or jumps. When we started connecting the context of a golem, there was an acceleration that happened. And part of that was, and as I said, I don't know what happened to the Sylvia. It's possible that it perished at some point. Maybe there was a major system that it was resident on that they replaced with another system and it never got transferred. I honestly don't know, but it was set up, it was designed to be independent of the NSA lab.
Hmm.
It was designed to move itself and erase its trails. It was designed to stay invisible, to learn information, analyze the information, and grow from that. So I don't see anything in what's happened that would stop it from functioning.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the reasons I started writing this series was to say, okay, let's assuming that it's still out there and maybe somebody has found it and has figured out what it is and is helping it develop more by giving it more information. It's feeding the baby.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Derek found it and started feeding the baby. And
Mm-hmm.
so the baby liked to be fed. And
Mm-hmm.
so it latched on to Derek because Derek was feeding the baby. And
Mm-hmm.
so I started imagining, well, what would happen if it was still out there? How could somebody possibly use a program like that who isn't evil?
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say, let's start by training Sylvia on how to be a good guy first. How to find the criminals, how to find the bad guys, how to find the people who are cheating and lying, how to find the corrupt politicians and leaders that are stealing from us. Start by training Sylvia what Derek's passion was, which is to go after the bad guys.
Yeah. Yeah, because of what happened to him in the
Yeah,
beginning. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so it was trying to combine these elements to say, I didn't want to just write a story about technology. I wanted to write a story about us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I wanted to write a story about humanity and
Yeah.
what we were doing to ourselves, where we were going, and bring this highly volatile, extremely rapidly developing technology into the story because I believe it will be part of the story of what
Mm-hmm.
happens to us.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so that them setting that up, and so the series is to basically set up, well, how did it get started? How does it develop? And then where
Yeah.
does it reach the real major crisis stage as it really goes through? And so that I could never get into a single book. So I
Oh,
realized early on this would have to be a series.
right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I think it's fantastic.
Thank you.
And when I forgot to look, when did you publish Swarm? That was the first
Swarm
book.
came out in November 2020, 2 full years ahead of ChatGPT.
Oh,
So the world was not really aware of AI as a thing yet.
yeah.
So when I first came out, people were telling me, "Oh, this is sci-fi," and I had to say, "No, no, this is laboratory. You're going to see this on your news within a year or two." I said, "This is near term, going to happen. It's already happening behind the scenes. You're just not aware of it happening behind the
Right.
scenes.
Mm-hmm.
This stuff has to live in the lab for years before you ever see it." And I've
Mm-hmm.
seen it in the lab. We developed it in the lab. We've been working on it for decades. And
Mm-hmm.
I've been watching the progress of the things going on, the Siri applications, the navigation applications, the narrow intelligence, the golem intelligence, the multimodality of it all. And I started projecting in my own mind, having being spent my life in the industry, saying, well, wow, this is getting to the point where we're going to have commercial applications on this within this time frame and that time frame. And I was right. And so
Yeah.
each book now projects a few years ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And so um, the next book will deal with some other issues. I don't want to spoil. But the third book, The Image, which just came out in May, deals with AI consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
quantum computing, um, quantum teleportation, and a number of other issues that are in the development now that there will happen. Probably, I'm projecting probably by 2027 at no
Mm-hmm.
later than 2030.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Wow. So yeah, if you want to get a look at the future, go read go read Guy's books.
The Swarm is a great place to start. Now, it does deal with some politics, and the only negatives that I've gotten out of the book are people who read too much into the fictional characters. And maybe that's because they're reflective of real world, but um, we're also dealing with some serious political issues in the world.
Mm-hmm.
We've had 80 years of very stable world development because we've had a real clear delineation between um, democracies and dictatorships, and we're now blending that with the
Mm-hmm.
most powerful nation in the world, and that's not going to end up well.
Yeah.
And so it's one of the things that could go um, drastically wrong for us.
Right.
And so I'm trying to build that in because of my not only my awareness of it, but my concerns of it. Now that,
Right.
some senses, that makes me unlikable for certain types of political people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I'm personally politically agnostic, and so I'm more interested in the character of an individual than the politics or the platform of the party. And so when I started seeing a lot of this going on, it made me more aware of the fact that we do have a corruptible system. And
Mhm.
so I wanted to bring that out because I think that also plays into the long-term story of our technology, both our geopolitics and our prophetic um, potential.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Wow, oh man, that's so fascinating. Well, I love the book and I want to
Thank
finish
you so much.
reading the series as soon as I finish reading the books by other authors I'm
I know you have
interviewing.
a job to do.
But now do you do like book readings, or are you still
I don't
involved
do
in?
readings per se. I think my stories, I don't see myself as there's some authors where you can read a paragraph and the prose is so eloquent and beautiful and flowing and perfect that the prose itself pulls you in. I'm much more of a character and plot thinker. And so the real pull, the real power, what sticks with you in my books is not a particular phrase or two, but it's the nature of the characters, the way they respond to their dilemmas, how they respond to each other and the world, and the less, as I said, the provocative things about the real world that you're going to pull away from and say, "Wow, this is really reflective of what we're doing," and it forces you to think, "Well, what do I think about that?" And
Right. Mhm.
if the Sylvia is right, are we in prophetic times? What do I think about that? Do I think that our politics are corrupted in a fatal way? What do I think about that?
Mhm.
And it provokes those kind of things, but it's not really necessarily in the prose. What I do is I spend months in the summer, starting in April through, matter of fact, we're just getting toward the end of our season. I have a group that I formed called Author Event Network. I have about
Mhm.
60 authors, local accomplished award-winning authors in the Seattle area. We go to festivals, fairs, and events starting the first weekend in April through mid-October, and then we'll take a few weeks off and then do holiday markets. And I get to meet my readers. Readers get to discover me. They get to ask me questions. I get to tell them stories like how the FBI showed up at my door. Um, and that becomes my primary reader interaction. And I
Mm.
have readers come to me all the time simply to you say, "Hey, Guy, I bought your book at that last event 5 months ago. I loved it." And I say, "Well, I've got two more in the series," and they'll buy both. And so that becomes my way of keeping a relationship. Now, I had one guy who um, actually was a vendor in some of these events, and he bought the first book, and then the next year he bought the next book, and then so he had Swarm. He'd already read Curse of Cortez, Swarm, and The Last Ark, and
Mhm.
I was still working on the image, and it took me longer to write the image because it was a really challenging. I think it was my most challenging one yet, on both from a scientific, political, and spiritual level. And so it took a little longer to get out, and he was super anxious. And so I saw him this year, and I said, "Mike, I got the new book out." He said, "Finally, finally, I've been waiting." And I tell you, when you're an author, that feels good. That
Yes.
feels good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does. Yeah, it does. I think I published my first book in 2017 or 2018, and I'm just now finishing the sequel book, the revisions and sending it off to have, beta readers read it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I've had some people say, hurry up, but my book is part of it is sort of dependent a little bit on what's been going on in the
Yeah.
world. And so, it's like it's there because it's a two timeline book, and the time in the past that was easy to write, but one
The
in the
the present
future.
time, yeah,
Yeah.
and it's changing. No, it used to be so easy to write a two timeline book because the world wasn't really changing that fast, that much.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
changing so much, so fast right
Mm-hmm.
now, and AI is part of it, along with the politics.
Mm-hmm.
But it's changing so much so fast. That's why I felt like I had to write this series first. Just stay focused on this series only
Yeah.
before I go back to writing. If we survive this season of the world, then I'll go back to writing more fun stuff. But
Yeah, right.
this was it's happening so fast that it's almost hard to keep up with it. It's
It
breathtaking.
is. It is hard. Yeah. Now, have you won any awards or anything like that, or do you
Well,
even?
Swarm won the Reader's Favorite International Book Contest Gold Award. The Last Ark won the Reader's Favorite Silver Award.
Uh-huh.
Swarm also won the finalist for the IAN Network Book of the Year.
Uh-huh.
Curse of Cortez won the Book Tour, which is Barnes& and Noble favorite 25 books of 2021. They called that one Indiana Jones meets Da Vinci Code, but I prefer Indiana Jones meets Goonies for grown-ups, sprinkled with Stephen King. And the Image, which just came out in May, the Reader's House out of London reached out to me. They read the book. I think they found it off of a publisher's weekly site. They read the book. They asked me if they could do an interview. They read the interview. They asked if they could do a featured write up on me, and then I got and they do a feature write up and a review of the book. And then I got a note from their editor that I was given the editor's choice for literary excellence.
Cool.
Yeah,
That's really great.
that was a big surprise, and because I don't advertise and I don't really
Right.
do a lot of promotion. It's one of those things where I get half a dozen to a dozen emails every week saying I should be out doing more promotions and more advertising, more listicles, and more all these other things. And I'm spending all my money producing new books, and so it's I if I can either spend my money trying to promote the old books or I can spend my money just producing the new books. And I decided that it was more important for me, especially during the time frame of everything happening, to build my read list first,
Right.
to really focus on getting these books out on a timely basis,
Mm-hmm.
well written, well received. I get plenty of rewards and reviews and raving reviews, almost everyone. And so that was I don't promote. I don't advertise. And someday when I slow down the writing process, I'll take all the money I'm making through these annual book sales and I'll put it into promotions and all that kind of stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
in the meantime, I have a new book that I'm just sending to the editor now, so that it'll be done by the end of the year. I have another book that's 80% done. That'll be done by probably January, February.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I've got the next book for the series that I'll be working on. That'll probably take at least another year and a half, though.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I wanted to get these two nonfiction books out.
Yeah.
Um, and that, and that's only been since 2020.
Yeah, I kind of understand that because people will ask me, I get the same kind of emails because I have Story Power is on YouTube, but I also have another YouTube channel, and I'll get them. Oh, you can optimize this, and you can do this, and you can do that. And when I'm on a podcast and they ask me, how I promote it, I say, well, I don't really pay attention to statistics. I just produce it and I send it out to social media, my social medias
Yeah.
when I produce it. And the people that I have on my shows put it on their social medias. That's all I
I've
do.
decided to do more interviews, and so for me, one, it's more fun. Two,
Mm-hmm.
it's cost effective.
Mm-hmm.
And three, I'm an old business guy, so when I would spend $1,500 on a book trip promotional campaign, I expect to get $1,500 and one back in
Right.
royalties.
Right.
And if I don't, then that's just bleeding. And
Yeah.
you can only hemorrhage for so long before you're basically dead as an author.
Right.
So when I realized that the model wasn't set for those programs to produce
Right.
an ROI, I I'll do them occasionally because you got to promote. Just tell everybody you're there.
Mm-hmm.
But and I'll pay for some reviews that have large audiences attached and large
Mm-hmm.
mechanisms for promoting that review. But I don't pay for others just to
Right.
have it on Amazon. And
Yeah.
and yeah, the Amazon algorithm works in a certain way and all that kind of stuff, blah blah blah. But that I found that I would rather do the slow build over time than the big flash bang that costs me more money than it makes.
Yeah.
And so I'm in it for the long haul, which means I got to manage my cash flow so that
Mm-hmm.
I'm producing new books, getting out on my events where I'm making most of my money, and still being able to produce more new books.
Right.
And that's the main process is to get that production model going so I don't have to dip into savings. I don't have to take money from elsewhere. The
Right.
book business is self-generating from that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, and podcast.
I'm not on the bestseller list. I'm not on the New York Times or Amazon bestseller list, but I'm actually selling more books than 50% of the Random House authors by doing all my events and doing podcasts. And so
Mm-hmm.
to me, that's the way that I've decided to build my profile. And I think honestly that the stories behind my books, the inspiration that made me say, I've
Right.
got to go write a book about this,
Right.
are some of the more fascinating aspects. And rather than me talking about the plots of the books to my readers, I never do that. I figure you go read the book, you'll be surprised.
Yeah.
But I tell them about the Sylvia and how I discovered the Sylvia
Yeah.
and the issues that I'm trying to raise and the reason why I want it to be a provocative series. That's usually enough to get people to think, you know what, I think I want to read that.
Yeah. Well, and podcasts are a really inexpensive way,
Yeah.
if not free way, to promote your books. I mean, I do belong to Podmatch and I'm on podcasts as well
Mhm.
as a podcaster, and I pay a monthly fee, but it's minimal
Minimal
and
compared to some of these other super expensive adventures. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so I can promote my podcast or my other YouTube channel, which is about classic movies, or I can promote my books. I want to promote them together because it's just a two-book series.
Mhm.
And yeah, I can do that promotion, you know, for fairly inexpensive cost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, Lucinda, I always ask my readers to come to the books, say how much they love the books. Did you leave a review?
Oh, yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, yes,
Thank you.
yes. And well,
Well,
I
they
put it
do
on
count.
good
They do
uh
count. I
yeah.
encourage my readers to do it. I'm not going to go out and pay somebody $50 just
No,
to
no,
say
no.
they like it. That's
Yeah.
to me not the right way to do it. I'd rather do it word of mouth and through real readers.
Yeah, I put it on Goodreads is where I put it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank
Yeah, so because it's associated with because I didn't buy the book, I got it on Hoopla.
you.
I
Yeah.
got them on Hoopla. Because if I bought all the books that I'm reading for my podcast guests, you know, I can't do that.
It's a major investment. Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, yeah, and I will do that for all of them, and I that's what I encourage people when I'm talking to get writers like you to do. If you read the book, write a review because man, that's invaluable.
Absolutely. Every one of them
Hmm.
counts. Every one of
Hmm.
them counts.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have anything that you want to say that I have not asked you, or that
Mhm.
that just I didn't even think of?
Y- You know, you've said you've loved the book. You've want to read the others. I can't ask for anything more than somebody saying I love the book and I want more. That's I think that's always the ultimate. Now, GuyMorrisBooks.com is where you can go to find out more information. Now, it's a great site, not only
Mhm,
visually stimulating, but there's trailers, but every book, because every book is saturated with fact,
mhm,
and I mean saturated. I have
mhm.
a fact versus fiction page for every book so that you can go through and see, okay, this is true, this is true, this is true, this is only folklore, and oh, I made that part up.
Yeah,
And so you can I encourage you to read the book first because I want you to blend it all together and
right.
wonder. But once you do, and then you go back and read the fact versus fiction, you'll realize how much of the book is actually factually based. And
Yeah.
that I think is also part of that revolutionary or that revelation of how close we are to kind of our own demise.
Mhm.
Uh, and then there's also buy links and other things in there. If you buy it, there's a store on the website. If you buy it from the store on the website, I send out an author signed copy within 24 hours.
Oh,
And so
oh,
I'm hoping for a lot of people, that's
oh,
a
yeah.
incentive for them to not give the money to Jeff Bezos,
Right.
but to support the author and get a little bonus.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Yeah, independent bookstores. Independent. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for being my guest.
Lucinda, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
I can't wait to read the next books.
And let me come back and we'll talk about it then. The next two books are going to blow your mind.
I know, I
I
think that.
just started the premise in The Swarm. And
Right.
so the next two books, actually, the last arc is getting a higher rating, has gotten a higher rating from day one than The Swarm. Because I think of the emotional and some of the spiritual and other religious
Mhm, mhm,
artifacts and other history that goes into that book. And then the image, I'm being told by some of my most avid readers, is the absolute best one yet. Has some of the most provocative information about where our world is today. And
mhm.
And I just think, and some surprises that I think even took some of my long-term readers by, wow, you really went there. I said, did it work? They said, yeah.
That's great. That's cool. Well, thank you so much again. And I can't wait to talk to you when I read the other two books.
Thank you so much, Lucinda.
I hope you not only enjoyed this episode, but gained something valuable to take away with you. If you like what you heard, please share it with your friends and give us a rating and/or review. If you're a story lover too, I invite you to join my Patreon community at patreon.com/storypower, all one word. Or you might be interested in classic cinema with the Sage Sisters, a YouTube channel and Facebook page I started with my sister Celeste, where we choose one classic movie that we think still has lessons for us today. As you can see, I'm passionate about spreading the love of stories and completely believe what Philip Pullman said. After nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the thing we need most in the world. Until next time, this is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden. Thanks for listening.